For Excel exercise number 7, we will be creating an assortment plan. So to create our assortment plan, we need to open up our retail buying Excel workbook, the same workbook that you saved your 6-month plan in. Open up that workbook and be sure to add a new sheet and label that assortment plan. Once we have our sheet, we need to format our sheet to reflect the department, the class percent to the department, have rows to list the brands, the actual percent to the class, the subclass, the percent to the class, the colors, the size, the fabrics, the fibers, and our price points. So we want to be sure to include all of these different factors. What you are going to do now is the retailer that you did your 6-month plan on and the retailer that you did your analysis on, that is the same retailer you will be now creating the assortment plan for. So you need to visit that retailer, check out that retailer store locations, and get familiar with the brands that retailer carries if they carry multiple brands, the different subclasses that are housed within the class that you are breaking down, the colors that are popular within that class, the sizes, the size range or the size scale that is being bought, the fabrics and the fibers that consist of the product that you are looking at, and also the different price points. So you need to analyze and look at this inside of the retail locations for the retailer you have selected. You need to get familiar with their product. You need to get familiar with the inventory in order to complete this assortment. So let me go ahead and get started and show you how I have analyzed Tilly's. So first off, my department is women's tops. Women's apparel. The class I'm analyzing is women's tops. So I need to represent the percent to the department that the tops represents. So the women's tops, after going through the Tilly store, looks to represent about 45% of the total women's apparel department. So I walked into Tilly's store, I started looking at the women's apparel. Within the women's apparel, I put a lot of focus and emphasis on the tops, where I noticed it was about 45% of the total inventory on the floor within the women's apparel department. So next, the different brands that they carried within this department included Blue Pepper, Patrons of Peace, Billabong, O'Neill, and Full Tilt. The percent to the class that they represented, Blue Pepper was about 20% of the women's tops, Patrons of Peace 20% of the women's tops. I would say Billabong was about 15% of the total tops. O'Neill was also about 15% of the total tops, and the Full Tilt product was about 30% of the total tops. Let me go ahead and expand my column so we can read this a little bit easier. So next, within the tops department, I noticed the different subclasses that were carried included blouses and shirts as one, tanks and camis as another, tunics and kimonos as another, and knit tops and tees as another, and the essentials, also known as the basics, as another. Tilly's refers to their basics as essentials, so that's why it really matters on what retailer you are examining to understand exactly what subclasses they carry. So then, the different colors that I've noticed on the retail sales floor that were very popular within the women's tops included white, navy, gray, brown, and a lot of print still happening out there. Oh, let's take one step back. We'll go back to the subclass. I noticed the blouses and shirts were about 25% of the total subclass. The tanks and camis were about 20% of the total subclass. The tunics and kimonos represent about 15% of the total class. The knit tops and tees represent about 25% of the total tops, and the essentials represent about 15% of the total tops. So next, looking at the colors, the white was about 20% of the inventory. The navy accounted for about 15% of the total inventory. The gray was also about 15%. I would say the brown was about 10%. Looking at the retail sales floor, the prints made up about 40% of the total inventory within the different print colorways on the floor. So the prints were still very popular this year. Next, looking at the size ranges, I noticed that Tilly's has about, the size ranges range from about extra small through extra large. So I will go ahead and fill that in as well. So the extra smalls, I would say, made up about 14% of the total inventory on the floor. The smalls, 25%. The mediums, 31%. And the larges, 19%. The extra larges were much smaller at about 11%. The different fibers and fabrics that were popular amongst all of these styles within tops were cotton, acrylic, rayon, and viscose. The cotton was about 50%, the acrylic about 30%, the rayon was about 10%, and the viscose was about 10%. The different price points that were popular within the women's tops department at Tilly's, I noticed, were $15.99, $19.99 price point, a $24.99 price point, a $29.99 price point, and also a $39.99 price point. I noticed at Tilly's we pretty much jumped up from $29.99 straight to $39.99. There were a couple items in between that price point, but overall that's where we had jumped up to. So the items that were about $15.99 accounted for 8% of the inventory in tops. The $19.99 price point accounted for 15% of the inventory. I would say the $24.99 price point accounted for about 35% of the inventory. The $29.99 price point also accounted for about 25% of the inventory, and the full tilt accounted for about the $39.99 price point accounted for about 17% of the total inventory. So after analyzing the brands, the subclass, colors, the size, fabrics, and fibers, and the price points, I can see exactly what's happening in this department. Let me go ahead and format this a little bit better. Okay. So now what you would do as a buyer after analyzing all of the different areas of the departments, this is now pretty much our guide and our assortment plan and how we need to buy. So when we go into market, we will be taking these sheets with us to look at exactly how we need to break down our buys. We see once we get to the brands and the vendors, whatever we're buying, we need to target for our brands to be pretty close to what we currently have for them. So blue pepper is about 20% of the inventory, so that's what we should buy. Patrons and Peace is about 20% of the inventory as well. We need to make sure we still represent them in the 20%. Billabong is about 15, O'Neill 15, and Full Tilt is about 30. So we definitely need to make sure that we continue to purchase our O'Neill products, of the Full Tilt products at about 30%. So this is how we're going to look at it. Also, once we get to the size scale, we can see Okay, the extra smalls are about 14%. So once we start determining what styles, what brands, what colors to order, we need to also make sure we are ordering all of these in the correct size. So these are the size ranges we will be ordering as well when we purchase our styles. So each style we purchase, we should be purchasing about 14% in the extra small, 25% in the small, 31% in the medium, 19% in the large, and about 11% in the extra large. As we are negotiating with our vendor, we need to make sure that we negotiate pretty close to all of these price points, negotiate the cost of goods to make sure our markup can still get us to our healthy margin, to get us close to these price points, because these are the price points that are very effective with our customer. So as you can see, this is really how we go ahead and break down the different assortment. These are all the different factors that we look at to then determine what exactly it is we need to buy. Let's also go ahead and add a picture in here to represent our assortment plan for the women's tops. So essentially this is exactly what we have for our assortment plan now. So as you can see, physically putting into Excel is not going to take you a large amount of time. However, you do need to make sure you go into that retailer, analyze the department and all of these different areas. We report back this information into our assortment plan, and then that is what we will go forward to place our future buys for this spring season.